This is not so much a traditional sermon, more a check-in following the conclusion of my 3-month sabbatical. Talking to Rev Kev earlier in the week, we agreed that sort of just a regular sermon dropped down in here would seem a little odd, given all that's transpired over these months. I would also say, because I do see that there are a couple young ones present, there are 2 ever so brief words of profanity in this sermon. So if that's a concern for the parents of young ones here, you can cover their ears. So I don't want to bury the lead, except for those of you who are here or tuning in for the first time. You know that my daughter Abby has been diagnosed with brain cancer, and I will speak to that in a bit. But though my sabbatical blessed me with dedicated time to devote to Abby and my wife Lourdes, that wasn't all there was to this time. So let me share some highlights. First, I grew a beard. Or as one of my church colleagues called it, a sabbatibeard. I guess growing a beard while on sabbatical is something of a cliche for men, a rite of passage. I'm not sure how long it will last, but for now, I will try to keep it well-groomed. The primary intention of my sabbatical was to work on a book I am writing with the working title, In Plain Sight, My Not-So-Hidden History with Anti-Black Racism. The book was born from the recognition that toxic and virulent anti-Black racism has been present in every place I have lived from birth to the present, but had remained unknown and unexamined by me until I took the time to look. In addition to lifting the veil on this racism, I asked what it is about the way I told the story of my life, the way white people often tell the stories of our lives, that keeps such racism hidden in plain sight. I have completed a prologue, an introduction, and almost 6 chapters in what will be a 10-chapter book. On sabbatical, I took time to visit some of the places my ancestors and I have lived, including Washington, D.C., where my mother is from, Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Main Line, where I was born and my Harris ancestors are from, Brevard County, Florida, where I lived through high school, and New Orleans, where I attended Tulane University on a Navy ROTC scholarship. I intended to spend 2 weeks in Hawaii, where I lived for 20 years in and out of the Navy, but as I will explain later, that trip was postponed. I begin each chapter by telling the story of a heroic Black figure or figures that lived in that time or place, most of whom had been unknown to me. Then I tell stories of my life that intersect the racism in that place. Most of these are not examples of me participating in overtly racist acts, but are examples of systemic racism, racism embedded in institutions, laws and government, and culture, books, music, and TV. I then offer a critique of the ways the narratives that I have accepted uncritically and perpetuated have functioned to minimize or explain away such racism. This is a selfie I took of me in the churchyard cemetery at the Great Valley Presbyterian Church in Malvern, Pennsylvania. Every direct Harris ancestors of mine, going back to Thomas and Elizabeth Harris, who lived on a nearby farm during the Revolutionary War, up to my father Joseph Harris, is buried here. These are Thomas and Elizabeth's gravestones. This is where my story begins. I begin the first chapter by telling the story of Ona Judge, who was born enslaved to Martha Washington, becoming her personal servant when she was 10 years old. Ona, who moved from the Washington's Mount Vernon estate to our nation's first capital in New York, then to Philadelphia, enjoyed a remarkable degree of privilege. But when Martha told Ona that she would be given to Martha's mercurial granddaughter, Ona realized that she would always be someone else's personal property and quickly escaped from the presidential mansion while the Washingtons entertained. Though she would suffer greatly in the remaining 22 years of her life, Ona never regretted seizing her freedom. During this very same period of time, my great-great-great-great-great-grand aunt Hannah, I lost the picture. Can you leave it up? So that quintuple great-grand aunt Hannah is this Thomas's sister-in-law, and she owned 11 of 23 enslaved black Americans in Newtown, Pennsylvania. It is not hard to imagine that my Aunt Hannah would have seen the ad that George Washington ran in the Philadelphia newspaper asking for Ona's capture and return. Writing in 1903, Harris family historian Joseph Harris might have leveled any number of critiques upon the enslaver Hannah, but writes only that she was a woman of more than ordinary executive ability. Her ownership of these 11 was deemed noteworthy by Joseph only in that it demonstrated her management skill. This is how my book proceeds, linking my own history to the little-examined history of racism in the places I have lived. For example, I compare the It's a Small World ride at Disney World that I visited many times as a kid, that I loved while living in Florida. You know, the one that presents all the children of the world living in happy harmony with the, well, I compared this with the nearby town of Eatonville, Florida. Eatonville was founded by former slaves as an all-black town in response to the violent racism they experienced, and is less than 20 miles from the Magic Kingdom. The brilliant black Harlem Renaissance writer and anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston was raised in Eatonville and wrote about the people there. I would have driven right by Eatonville as a kid many times, but knew nothing of it until last year. I visited Eatonville on my sabbatical, toured the small town, and ate a delicious meal of braised oxtails in a soul food restaurant there. My time in DC, Philadelphia, New Orleans, and Florida was exceptionally rich, and I wish I could tell you every story, but that will have to wait. You'll have to read my book. Concerns about Abby's health first arose before the end of October, during the DC-Baltimore trip, when Abby had a seizure. A referral to a neurologist back in Connecticut led to an MRI that identified a mass in the left side of her brain. A biopsy followed that revealed a glial cell tumor that can be treated for a time with a combination of radiation and chemo, but cannot be cured. In time, this will cause her death. This news sent us reeling, to say the least. Nothing can possibly prepare one to respond to such news, not Abby, nor me and Lourdes as her parents. Lourdes and I have taken our lead from Abby. Some of you know she filmed a video of herself speaking into the camera about her diagnosis and posted it on her social media. In it, she committed to live a beautiful life with the time she has left and encouraged all of us to do the same. I'd like to say a few things about what that beautiful life has looked like thus far. By sharing openly with hundreds of friends on social media, Abby instantly opened supportive lines of communication with them. Abby celebrated her birthday with about 30 of her girlfriends, and she regularly gets together with some of her better friends in town. After some plans fell through the other day, she posted a request for someone to take her to Bar Taco in West Hartford, and an old middle school friend quickly agreed to pick her up for a late lunch. Abby has been brilliant in asking for what she needs in a way I have rarely witnessed, and in a way that I find challenging to do myself. Abby processes every aspect of her illness and its implications with me and Lourdes. This is not for the faint of heart. I can tell you there are times we would rather just not talk about it. We have had many conversations about death and dying. In fact, one evening at dinner, she asked what we thought about where she should be buried, asking if she could have a stone next to her gramp in this same churchyard cemetery at the Great Valley Presbyterian Church. This led to a wonderful, awful conversation that came to include my brother and his family about how and where we would like to be remembered. Abby is determined to live her life, keeping her job at a Canton boutique, and she has a wicked, dark sense of humor. Living a beautiful life is a noble goal, and God bless Abby for wrestling some precious, love-filled moments out of each day. But make no mistake, this is an ugly mess. Our lives include lots and lots of tears, hers and ours, and intense anger, including white-hot meltdowns between the three of us. There really is no way to describe it without the use of profanity, so forgive me, but our go-to expression is to refer to all of this as a shit show. In fact, Abby, Lourdes, and I each got a tattoo on our forearm that says, "Live a beautiful life," rendered in Abby's handwriting. Abby and I were joking last night, remember that dark sense of humor? We were joking last night that to be complete, we really need a tattoo on our other arm. So taken together, they read, "Life is a shit show, live a beautiful life." Isaiah is more poetic than this, but he is saying something similar. Except instead of using the S word, Isaiah uses the word fire. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." God doesn't promise us a life without suffering, witness the crucifixion, but only that God will be with us, that the pain of this life will not ultimately overwhelm us and consume us. So let me see if I can wrap this up and point to the way forward. Let me know what you think about the beard. Thumbs up or thumbs down, stay or go. As for my book, I continue to write. In the coming year, I will make the Hawaii trip, hopefully with Lourdes and Abby, finish it, and look for a publisher. I have shared what I have written so far with our racial justice activation team, and we will discuss whether there is a helpful way to bring the material before the congregation. As for Abby and our family, we are taking it a day at a time. I have always been a pastor who seeks to make myself vulnerable before the church as a way of giving you permission, inviting you to be vulnerable with your hardships and limitations, that you might open yourself to the healing love and grace of God as made known through the church. I do not intend to talk about what's going on with Abby and my family all the time. It's not healthy for me or my relationship with you as one of your pastors. I have set up a site on the Caring Bridge website where we will provide updates. You are welcome to ask me how Abby is doing, but I suggest that you check there first. I know, as awful and all-consuming as this can feel to me and my family, that what some of you are going through right now feels just as awful and all-consuming to you. I will seek to minister to you in response to your need, not out of my need. Hear God's word to each and all of us spoken through Isaiah. You are precious in my sight and honored, and I love you. Do not fear, for I am with you. Amen.